Jeff McNeil had a remarkable bounce-back campaign in 2022 that resulted in his first ever batting title. Now, 2 years away from free agency, is it time for the New York Mets to lock up their two-time All-Star to a long-term deal? I'll discuss that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, Jeff McNeil is coming off an amazing season where he took all of the doubters and he put them to shame by bouncing back in a massive way to go from a 251 hitter to the batting title champ. And I was looking through the archive today. I posted this on Twitter, but I had a take on March 8th, setting expectations for Jeff McNeil in 2022, where I said, if the Mets are to trade Jeff McNeil, don't be surprised if he goes on to be an all-star again and to win the batting title. And luckily, this was again at a time where fans were sort of pushing McNeil out. There was all this talk about trading a Dom Smith, a Jeff McNeil, or a J.D. Davis heading into the season. And instead, they keep him. He goes on to accomplish those exact feats in a Mets uniform, has an amazing season. And, you know, my basis at the time for saying McNeil was going to win a batting title and he was going to be an all-star again was because if you look at 2018, 2019, and 2020, the first 3 years of his career, nobody hit for a higher average in Major League Baseball than Jeff McNeil. Now, as we add in his batting title winning season, as well as the worst season of his career in 2021, where he hit 251, his career numbers are a 307 hitter, 370 on base, 458 slugging. Among hitters with at least 2,000 plate appearances since 2018, there's only one hitter in all of baseball with a better batting average than Jeff McNeil. It's a guy by the name of Freddie Freeman, a pretty good hitter. And Michael Brantley is also tied with McNeil, I should mention, at 307. You look at strikeout rate since he came in. 11.9% of the time Jeff McNeil strikes out. That is the fourth lowest among all hitters in baseball. His on-base percentage of 370 is 15th best. WRC plus of 131 is 22nd, and that again measures hitters based on a league average of 100, weighted runs created plus. So a top 25 hitter in baseball throughout his career, and that is, again, including a season where he was dreadful and a below average hitter based on WRC plus. So if you throw out that season altogether, I mean, you're probably looking at more of a top 15 to top 10 hitter in baseball based on that metric. Now, you look at what makes Jeff McNeil so great. And I was obviously able to look at, you know, the batting average, and those things are the first things you jump towards. But what I wanted to look into, as we're going to get into the contract discussion the next segment here, is projecting forward. What is it that Jeff McNeil does that you can have faith in? And it's the plate discipline, because I can make the argument, as I'm about to, that there's not a hitter in baseball with better plate discipline than Jeff McNeil. Since his debut, he leads all hitters in zone swing percentage. So this is times where he swings the bat when a pitch is in the zone, 83.1% of the time. Now, you look at zone swing percentage, you'll see someone like Avisail Garcia in the top of that list. Well, that's because he's swinging all the time. So when there's pitches in the zone, he's swinging. But you know, he swings and misses where Jeff McNeil does not. And so, yes, Jeff McNeil is a free swinger in a sense, but, you know, you're looking at the guys in baseball that swing a lot, and he's at 56.4% of the time since his debut. Jeff McNeil is going to swing the bat. So he's swinging the bat over half the time. But, you know, that's the fourth most in baseball behind Avisail Garcia, Tim Anderson, and Ozzie Albies, and ahead of guys like Javi Baez and Eddie Rosario. McNeil, though, has the lowest outside the zone swing percentage among that group of hitters. The only one that's less than 40% of the time at 36.7. So all these guys are swinging, but they're swinging at everything. Jeff McNeil is swinging primarily when pitches are in the zone. And yes, while he does swing outside the zone more than some other hitters in baseball because he's always prone to fire at any time, he's also wasting pitches. He's swinging at pitches outside the zone, but he's making contact. I mean, that's the big difference here because you look at Baez, you look at Avisel Garcia, they make contact outside of the zone just over 50% of the time. They're barely connecting when they swing outside the zone. Jeff McNeil is connecting 75% of the time, basically, 74.4%. Eddie Rosario, the only hitter that's among this group of quote-unquote free swingers who makes contact on pitches outside of the zone more than 70% of the time at just around 71. So, Jeff McNeil is swinging more than anyone, or right up there with the most. Swinging outside the zone a lot, but when he does swing outside the zone, he makes contact, and he swings outside the zone less than some of these other guys, and he's not missing. So, this is where you get to the point where I can say Jeff McNeil has the best plate discipline in baseball, and here are the other stats that really back this up. You have called strike percentage. Okay, so how many times does an umpire actually get to put that finger out and call a strike on Jeff McNeil that he doesn't swing at himself? 9.3% of the time. It's the lowest mark in baseball. Now, Avisel Garcia, which is funny to see these two names right next to each other because they couldn't be more opposite when it comes to hitters. His called for strike percentage at 9.4% since 2018. So not having a lot of strikes called on him, but he's swinging in the zone and missing in a way that Jeff McNeil is not because you add in the whiffs, and there's this great stat, called for strike plus whiff rate. Okay, so this is basically trying to tell you, who's falling in the hole a lot, right? Jeff McNeil has the lowest called for strike whiff percentage in baseball. So what that's saying is, whether it's whiffing in pitches that are in the zone or the called strikes, he is either swinging in the zone and connecting, okay, or, he's looking at pitches outside the zone. I mean, he is just meticulous about his strike zone. That called for strike plus whiff rate for Jeff McNeil is at 18.4%. You compare that to Avisel Garcia swing all the time. His at 28%. Best mark in baseball, and it's ahead of Freddie Freeman. The two best in baseball when it comes for the called for strike plus whiff rate. It's Jeff McNeil 1, Freddie Freeman 2. And we all know and have seen firsthand the plate discipline of a Freddie Freeman. Now, I can't take the leap and really call Jeff McNeil the best hitter in baseball, as if you're looking on YouTube, you see, on the show sheet today. But he is the most disciplined hitter in baseball as a free swinger, which is the remarkable thing, because it's not just that, he's this guy who's drawing walks and he has a good eye and he just sits there and sees a bunch of pitches. He's always looking to swing, and if it's anything close, he's swinging the bat. He's either fouling pitches off or he's putting them in play, and he's finding a way to get on base. He's coming off a season now where he hit 326, 382 on base, 454 slugging, 39 doubles, 1 triple, so 40 extra base hits that weren't home runs. He did have 9 homers, 73 runs scored, 62 RBIs, a 143 WRC plus, 43% better than your league average hitter. Between his plate discipline, his advanced bat-to-ball skills, I mean, there's nothing that would indicate that this guy's going to slow down in his 30s because he doesn't have this game that's predicated on power where he might lose some juice and not be able to get on base. He's still going to be able to collect his hits. You now eliminate the shift, and while Jeff McNeil was remarkable at hitting against the shift and really making people pay. We saw it all season long where he's able to just find those holes. Well, now he could just find the natural holes in the infield. And Jeff McNeil could hit a hard ground ball right up the middle and get a hit. He can hit one between the third baseman and the shortstop on a pitch outside, and he certainly can pull balls and get hits that way. For a guy who has as complete of a swing as Jeff McNeil, a more traditional infield alignment, can still be something he can exploit just as much as he was able to exploit that shift. And again, this is why I think he's just going to be one of the best hitters in baseball for a very long time. But what we're going to do next here is discuss a contract extension. This is something that we've broached on this show many a time, but now I think it really has come into the forefront where I think a lot of people would agree that this is the time to extend Jeff McNeil. We're going to get to that. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. And right now, you can find some bets on the free agents that are on the market. Justin Verlander, if he is to sign with a team not named the Astros, you know who is the favorite to land him? The New York Mets with plus 375 odds. Then you have the Yankees at plus 400, Dodgers at plus 450, Giants at plus 500, then the Texas Rangers. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, so what would a contract extension for Jeff McNeil look like? Well, he made $3 million this season, his first year of arbitration. You go to SpotTrack, they have him listed at $6.5 million is the projected salary next season, so $3.5 million bump. If he was to get a similar bump going into his final year of arbitration in 2024, you're looking at $11 million. So Jeff McNeil over the next 2 years prior to hitting free agency is due to make over $15 million, but probably less than 20. Because again, even if he wins another bag title as an all-star, I don't know if you're going to see a jump to anything outrageous in arbitration. So with that said, what would a contract look like? What the Mets have to leverage here is the fact that they have him under control for 2 more years. He's entering his age 31 season. This is the time that the guy would probably like to have a long-term deal secured, knowing that his career earnings are set. That's what these guys want. That's why you see the Braves do so well on these extensions, because they leverage their control. And we've actually seen reports that the Mets have been a little bit, I don't know if upset is the right word, but they've been, having a little bit of remorse that they didn't try to extend someone like Brandon Nimmo last offseason. Jacob deGrom reworking that contract because now they have to pay their full market value to retain their players. And we just saw them do that with Edwin Diaz, but in a creative way that we will go through in the final segment. When it comes to a Jeff McNeil contract, I have actually been on the same number for over 2 years now. I was looking back. I did a podcast November 2020 where I pitched the exact same contract to a certain extent as the one I'll pitch now. And I had this same number in a podcast during the season this year. So I was trying to see, what have I said before? Because I know I've discussed Jeff McNeil contract extensions in the past. The number I always come back to is a 5-year deal worth $70 million. That's always been where I've been with McNeil. And you look at how you get there. Look at these first 2 years, the arbitration years. $10 million a season, $20 million, $5 million signing bonus. So for McNeil's perspective, he's going to go from maybe making 17 the next 2 years to $25 million. And he'll get a signing bonus. So, for a guy that just made $3 million, a $5 million signing bonus, here's a nice little reward, Jeff, for winning a batting title. That's going to go a long way. Okay, so now you have him locked in through arbitration. Then you're getting 3 years of his free agency at $15 million a year. If Jeff McNeil continues to be the player that he's been, which again, based on average, is a top 3 hitter in baseball as far as just hits, okay, who gets base hits the most, that's what this guy does. Jeff McHits. You look at plate discipline, the most disciplined hitter in baseball, who's been a 2-time All-Star and now a batting title champ at $15 million per bargain. For McNeil, a nice, considerable salary that he can lock in. And for a guy that felt what it was like to have a bad year in 2021, what a load of stress off your back to know your money is locked up. But it's still a good contract for him. So that's $45 million for 3 years of free agency. You already have the additional money that you're going to make on that arbitration, so the $25 million. That gets you to 5 years, $70 million. And here's where you sweeten the pot for him a little bit more. A 6-year club option for $15 million, $5 million buyout. So now suddenly he's getting a guarantee of $75 million, which brings you to an AAV of $15 million per over 5 years. An extremely reasonable contract, but one that a guy like Jeff McNeil just has to sign because of how late he debuted. This gives him what he would, it locks in his career, man. You know, yes, if Jeff McNeil were to wait, okay, and he were to bet on himself, and he played 2 more years at an elite level, well, let's say he wins another batting title, wins a gold glove, and goes out and is an all-star the next 2 years. So he's a 4-time all-star when he hits free agency. I think he could probably command Marcus Simeon money, although Simeon was coming off a 45 home run season where he won a gold glove and a silver slugger. That's a level of production based on the home runs that McNeil could never get to. But Simeon got $25 million per. If Jeff McNeil has everything go right for him, he can maybe get to $25 million per. But it's not going to be over a 7-year deal by the time he hits free agency. It's going to be over a 4-year deal. Something like that. So now you're talking maybe 4 for 100. Great contract for him. He'd make more money. But everything has to break right for him to get there. So, yeah, he could do that. He could try to wait. Or he can lock in right now and make sure that for that 4-year contract, the 4 free agent years, he's guaranteed to make $50 million. And with that option, if it gets picked up, it's 60. That's where you're at. And he's going to be making more in the 2 years of arbitration. So that's how you structure a contract for Jeff McNeil, where, again, he goes from maybe making 17 over the next 2 years to making 25. And he takes the hit or he takes a little bit less, and for the Mets perspective, you get 4 years of control at $60 million if you pick up the option, as opposed to maybe having to pay $100 million on the high end or even $20 million per year. You could be saving $20 million, and you're keeping a player on your team that not only could be your starting second baseman for the next, 6 years. He could be your starting third baseman in an absolute pinch. He can absolutely be your starting left fielder. He could even be your starting right fielder in a pinch. I mean, you can't undervalue what that means to your ball club, especially just the fluidity of it during the season, as we've seen in 2019. And even, in 2021 to a certain extent too, while he wasn't hitting, his positional flexibility was huge. They make a trade to get Javi Baez, he shifts into the outfield. And then we saw it again this year. Starlin Marte goes down, you slide him into right. You have Canna struggling, you slide him into left at times when you had the Lou Guillorme thing working at second base. He's so valuable to the Mets, and he can be had on an extremely team-friendly contract if you come to terms right now. To me, it's almost the contract that needs to be signed more than any this offseason. Pete Alonso is right up there too, and we'll discuss him next week. But for him, you're going to have to pay a premium due to the home runs. McNeil, I really, and also the age of Alonso is in his favor a little more when it comes to leverage. McNeil just is the perfect extension candidate, in my opinion. I've been on this for 3 years now. Hopefully it finally comes to fruition. But next, what I want to do is discuss the Edwin Diaz contract. We haven't really gotten into the parameters of that on this show, and it also could be a little bit illuminating for how they might structure a lot of their contracts this offseason. We'll get to that in just a minute, but first, another word from our sponsors. So I have yet to discuss the structure of Edwin Diaz's contract, which is pretty fascinating. So 5-year, $102 million deal. The breakdown when it comes to salary per season is $17.25 million in 2023, $17.25 again in 2024, $17.5 in 2025, $18.5 in the final 2 seasons that he has to opt into because he has that player option. So a little bit backloaded so that if he opts out for the Mets, rather affordable for those 3 years. Although the signing bonus certainly brings that number up. And then you have $1 million buyout for the Mets on a $17.25 million option for a 6th year. Now, here's the interesting part. There's $26.5 million in deferrals. So you have $5.5 million deferred annually from 2023 through 2025, $5 million each year in 2026 and 2027 if he opts in. There will be no deferred money on that final year of his deal. That's just going to be paid out if the Mets pick up the option. Deferrals begin to be paid in 2033 to 2042 at $2.65 million annually. And what all that deferrals did, and you could find a luxury tax expert on Twitter or something to really understand the breakdown, but the bottom line that we know here is the average annual value of his contract when it comes to luxury tax is $18.6 million. He was able to top Aroldis Chapman, which he wanted to do not only in total contract value but also in signing bonus, getting that $12 million signing bonus as opposed to Chapman at $11 million, which for these players, that's money in your pocket right now. You gotta love a signing bonus. In return for that, he was able, or the Mets were able, to get him to accept those deferrals in his contract, which were able to lower the average annual value, which is important for luxury tax purposes. Steve Cohen doesn't mind paying any of these guys, but it's just trying to lower that tax bill. And also, the Mets would like to, at some point, get below the Steve Cohen tax threshold. They're going to go over 290 this year, but don't expect them to do that for the next 5 years while Edwin Diaz is under contract. So that's what this is all about. Now, there's also incentives in his deal for World Series MVP, Reliever of the Year, All-Star Gold Glove, League Championship Series MVP, Cy Young, and also Cy Young voting. He has some incentives on that. Incentives are typical for any of these guys, so whether it is a Jeff McNeil extension or a Brandon Nimmo contract, imagine that stuff gets baked in. But I could also see for those 2 guys in particular, as well as Pete Alonso, if he were to get extended this offseason, I could see some deferrals in their contracts to, again, bring down that luxury tax AAV. The one guy that I think that we can probably assume will get his full money value contract is Jacob deGrom, assuming the Mets sign him, because I don't think he's happy with how the deferral structure was worked into his last contract. So I would not even broach that topic if I'm the Mets. I'm looking at trying to get him signed on the dotted line on a contract that mitigates your risk long term. So if that's a 3-year deal with creative vesting options, I think that's where you go. And it's more just a high salary on the front end. And again, over time, Steve Cohen can try to move the money around to be able to get below that threshold. You soon get like a James McCann off the books. That helps a little bit. If you can cost control guys like McNeil and Alonso by getting their extensions worked out, you're just going to be in a much better place moving forward. But the Diaz contract was very interesting. I think when we've now seen what Rafael Montero and Robert Suarez got, this has looked more and more like a very solid contract for the best reliever in baseball. And I think the Mets have to continue to work on retaining their own players. And for me, one of those top priorities, as we spoke about the entire show today, is Jeff McNeil. Another one, which we will broach next week, is Pete Alonso. Anyway, though, that is going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I hope you all had an amazing Thanksgiving holiday and the Thanksgiving weekend ahead of you here. As always, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @FinkelsteinRyan. Follow the show, @Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. hosted by Peter Bukowski. Locked On Sports Today is where you should go to stay up to date with everything going on in sports, with instant game reaction, breaking news, the take of the day. You can follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.